Cyrus has got the skills. Chris has got the swagger.
One amateur artist will get their song produced by my record label. You really write that song about me?
Come on, girl, what'd you think?
I had my part in this and now I'm starting to regret it.
What's your problem? We in this together, Cyrus.
You just gotta speak up for yourself and be who you really are.
It's about the music, it's what I'm good at.
Let it shine.
Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the DCOM review. It's finally time to take our signature closer look at the 2012 hit, Let It Shine. But, most importantly, it gives me another chance to really dive into the mind behind this movie. Yep, you guessed it, this one's a Paul Hohen flick, so you know there's a ton to talk about. On this channel, he's been called the man, the myth, the legend, amongst other titles. But, did the galaxy's greatest director of DCOMs bring his A-game to this film? Well, let's find out. Spoiler warning now, this review will be detail heavy. With all that said, let's dive in to Let It Shine. Our story kicks off in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, right in the middle of a church choir performance of Joyful Noise. But the classic gospel track gets a bit of flair added to it. And, courtesy of some great facial acting on the part of the pastor, who we later learn is Cyrus's dad, we recognize the central conflict in this movie very quickly. Now usually we're given a bit more exposition to start a movie like this one, but the move to throw us right into the father-son dilemma was a brilliant one because it trusts us, the audience, to pick up on the characters quickly and then go into the rest of the film from there, as opposed to wasting time building up Cyrus as a rapper. It's a much cleaner and better executed version of how the Cheetah Girls were introduced to us in the original 2003 film. So, Cyrus is portrayed here by Tyler James Williams, who many of you may know from Everybody Hates Chris, which adds a bit of irony that is probably intentional on the part of the writers to not just name his best friend Chris in the context of this movie, but to have that Chris act in such deplorable ways, literally giving good reason for some onlookers to hate him. Chris is portrayed by Trevor Jackson, who hasn't really done anything you might have heard of, but hey, he was in 2 episodes of Austin and Ally, so there's that, I guess. So soon we end up at Off the Street, a well-intentioned hangout spot for all the young Atlanta folk. They specialize in dance as well as rap, which anchors a lot of the movie. This gives us our introduction to the movie's main antagonist, Lord of the Bling. A pretty silly name, but then again, Brandon Michael Smith does portray him a bit over the top, with just the right amount of attitude, but we'll go deeper into his character later. For now, he challenges Cyrus, who works at Off the Street, but even after Cyrus puts together some nice lines, he doesn't step up to the real stage when he's called out. If you've seen this movie, then you know he has the ability. In fact, he just showed a sample right in Bling's face. So, the question is, why doesn't he get up on that stage? Remember that question when we break down Cyrus as a character a little later on. So, later, Cyrus and Chris are watching TV, and they see Roxy, their old friend from way back when. She's advertising a songwriting contest, so it shouldn't come as any surprise that one of the 2 individuals in this room will win said contest. Otherwise, this movie would be 22 minutes long and we'd miss out on that brilliant rap battle. This leads to Cyrus creating the song Don't Run Away for the contest, a solid song that kind of explains itself rather well if you've heard it. So later on, a contest winner is picked at Off the Street, and wouldn't you know it, truth wins. But uh-oh, there's been a classic case of mixed up identities, and the contest reps think Chris is Truth. Why? Because Cyrus sent in a picture with both of them in it. Yes, really. And I would call this a major movie misstep if not for what they went on to create narratively, using the mix-up as a catalyst. So, Chris, being kind of a dim-witted jerk all things considered, decides to not straighten things out and let Roxy and everyone else keep on thinking that he is Truth, because there's absolutely no way that this very sizable lie will blow up in anyone's face. So Roxy is portrayed by Coco Jones, who had a recurring role in So Random and in the later Good Luck Charlie seasons, but mostly sings. But more importantly, her manager, who kills it in this role, is played by comedy icon Nicole Sullivan, who, in addition to being very funny in a great many things, was also the superb voice acting talent behind one of Disney Channel's greatest villains. So, Cyrus and Chris continue to skirt around the issue of Chris not actually being Truth, and those moments are genuinely enjoyable. But it does help that Roxy as a character isn't the most perceptive individual, so most of the second act of the film involves Cyrus and Roxy slowly getting to know each other, which works well as parallel character arcs since both of them prove to be more than a little apprehensive about allowing their true selves to show. This leads to an interesting confrontation between Cyrus and Levi, the man who runs Off the Street, and is portrayed by Zach Desert, who was recently the science teacher in Invisible Sister and less recently played Eli for a short time in Boy Meets World. It's a wonderfully captured conversation that doesn't waste any time and gets right to the point regarding Cyrus's inability to embrace his own personal truth. It accomplishes the goal of being potent advice without sounding too preachy for the situation, which is hilariously ironic since the preacher is the next major hurdle Cyrus has to face. So Cyrus and Roxy continue to spend time with each other on various fronts, and their moments work really well. At first, it doesn't seem like they have too much chemistry between them, but then if you think about the kind of character Cyrus is, someone who's a bit more soft-spoken in nature, then you can see how natural it all really feels, in the sense that both Cyrus and Roxy gradually become more and more themselves as time goes on, which is a great way to film a budding relationship because that tends to be how real relationships bud. So Cyrus eventually invites Roxy to the church where she used to sing before her career started happening, and even performs once again. She sings Good to Be Home, which becomes terribly ironic since once the sermon starts, it quickly devolves into Terrible to Be Home, as the pastor rips on every rap and hip-hop trend in existence. It's kind of funny how a pastor like himself, who has such flow to his sermons and who can really flat out perform, can't seem to get behind rap as a genre. So in the aftermath of that, his wife chews him out big time, and he goes to the shooting of Truth's new music video to apologize to Roxy. It's there where Cyrus has to admit to him that he does in fact work at Off the Street, and even stands against him when he demands he leaves.
And don't make me repeat myself.
No.
I can't be the only one who immediately had get the belt flashbacks when he adamantly said no to his dad. That would never fly in my house. But in any case, while all of this Cyrus-Roxy plot was happening, Cyrus has been slowly getting more and more infuriated with Chris and his womanizing antics. This later builds up to a semi-violent confrontation between the two friends, with both of them telling the other exactly what they needed to hear. Things get even worse when Cyrus's dad orders him to quit his job. But eventually, his father sees the truth behind his songs that embrace good Christian values as far as he's concerned. Both his resolution with his father and his eventual resolution with Chris are well timed, since all of this leads up to the rap Grand Slam. The best part about both songs performed during this event is how both the Cyrus-Roxy duet and the rap battle with Bling were properly built up to as previous narrative plot points, but in two different ways. We learned early on that Cyrus was constructing a duet track, but what wasn't completely obvious is that he made the song specifically as a way to express to Roxy, in time, who he really was and why he couldn't be upfront about it. The performance itself is really great too, very raw, very emotional, and Coco Jones herself does well to balance both the shock and the frustration she's feeling within the context of the performance itself, while also continuing to perform before not being able to take it anymore and storming off. Long story short, everything about that scene works and works masterfully. The setup was a classic example of the sheer genius of Paul Hohen, where the devil is in the details of both what's expressed and what's intentionally left out, in order to play out in a particular way that not only makes sense for all the characters involved, but is also just a great movie moment in its own right. Plus, the visceral emotions of Roxy during these scenes work really well too. She just got into a spat with her manager about wanting to be true to herself out there on stage, only to be given a metaphorical slap to the face with Cyrus and Chris revealing that they were being anything but this whole time. But she returned the favor with a more literal slap to the face later on. It's the most crushing thing that her character could have been put through at this point in time, and Coco Jones flat out nails the moments during and after the duet. And now, we've got all the pieces in place for one more showdown between the real Truth and Bling. Every previous battle, interaction, and realization from the film has been building up to this point. The battle itself is a straight-up slugfest, with neither combatant holding anything back, and I love that they kept it relatively close until it's time for Cyrus to literally reveal the truth about Bling, which you'll already know from when Cyrus saw him driving a cab before. There were a couple of rap battles in this movie, and within the strict limitations of what Disney Channel will allow their writers to convey, none of it felt overly corny or too plain. It all more or less worked as appetizers for the main course of this battle, and it delivered. And a lot of the credit has to go to both Tyler James Williams and Brandon Michael Smith for not just delivering the rhymes, but delivering the intensity too, making it feel like a real battle, and not just a way to resolve the movie. So, Cyrus wins the rap battle, and Chris tries to explain everything to Roxy. Eventually, Roxy ends up back at the church after Chris is convincing, and Cyrus and the cast cap off their glorious victory with the take-home song, Let It Shine, which is as good if not better than any closing number I've seen on a DCOM. For me, it's right up there with Breakthrough or We're All in This Together, because it's just packed to the brim with energy. It almost forces you to sing and clap along. And now, the characters. Cyrus's dad, Pastor Jacob, is a strict, no-nonsense Christian purist. He's an interesting character because he serves as an obstacle for Cyrus to overcome without actually being a complete antagonist himself. He's right about some things, but very misled about other things, which is to be expected due to his conservative nature. Courtney B. Vance that plays him does a phenomenal job portraying this exact character and really getting the emotional nuances and dialogue delivery correct, and his actual sermons were exceptionally captivating even when you knew that some of his points were wrong. You might not completely enjoy him in this role if his at times loose interpretation of the Lord's Word offends you, but it isn't this movie's job or intention to speak substantively on Christianity, so that's not really a rabbit hole I feel like jumping into. I don't have too much to say about Nicole Sullivan in her role as Roxy's manager Lila. As an actress, she's funny in almost everything, and she's plenty funny here too, in addition to nailing that business-first music industry mentality. Brandon Michael Smith as Bling just might be the brightest light in Let It Shine, ironically enough. It's like this is the role he was born to play. He's absolutely outstanding here, and I'd be hard-pressed to find a better casted supporting character than him in the history of DCOMs. The character he plays is designed to be unlikable, but I found myself liking him anyway, and that has a lot to do with Brandon's ability as an actor here, in addition to Paul's ability to channel his unique energy and flair into a brilliant finished product of a character that is a living embodiment of looks aren't everything, which is a subtle jab directed at the multitude of rappers for which style is more important than their substance. Again, the character of Bling is kind of a dick, but the character design is brilliant, and a sizable step above the goofball he played in Sunny with a Chance. Chris is the character I found a great deal more unlikable than Bling. With Bling, his situation actually made me want to overlook some of his shortcomings as a person, but with Chris, he's directly responsible for half the movie's problems. He's a terrible friend and honestly a worse person. He did feel like a very authentic person, however, and to his credit, Trevor Jackson gives a very genuine performance that really understands and embraces what a kid at his age obsessed with the rap and hip-hop dance culture might actually act like. That doesn't change the fact that I personally didn't enjoy his character at all, even when things eventually did get resolved, but he was still a well-portrayed character. And amongst his many near-divine talents, one thing Paul Hohen always gets out of his actors is their best. Roxy isn't a terribly complicated character, but she functions well for the purpose of the movie. She's struggling with her self-image, and after getting to know Cyrus better, decides to make a brave change. It's never an easy thing to do, but Roxy makes the powerful point that being a star isn't as important as being true to yourself, which is exactly what this movie is all about. Coco Jones does fairly well in a relatively standard and predictable role, although I didn't feel that she had an overwhelming amount of presence until the final third of the film, where her acting shifts from serviceable to exceptional. Tyler James Williams does well here in portraying a somewhat introverted, speaks easier through his art, background sort of individual in Cyrus. His stage name of Truth might seem a little on the nose, but it actually really works as an intentional narrative device, because every main character, and even some minor ones, resolve their arcs by finding and accepting their own truth, and that's more true for Cyrus than anyone else. The whole Be the Real You plot has been done incessantly, but like with most of his movies, Paul places a unique spin on it by creating a character in Cyrus that is directly responsible for the truth everyone else finds in addition to his own. It's not just about being the real Cyrus, it's about the impact that Cyrus has as truth. He uses that influence to make his father understand his passion, eventually make Chris understand his phoniness, and inspire Roxy to be more real with her music. Without turning it into a complete biblical metaphor, his character essentially serves as a means for others to see the light, and let that light shine. And eventually, once Truth and Cyrus become the same person again, he's ready to take on Bling, the exact opposite of Truth as far as his rapping goes. That's the reason he couldn't take him on earlier. Cyrus had to find himself before he could overcome Bling, so it was only after he came clean about everything that he himself could, as the title suggests, let it shine, in the form of body-bagging Bling in a rap battle. It's beautifully metaphorical and an incredible take on a concept that's been done to death in plenty of other movies. I think Cyrus's intriguing character has a little more to do with the narrative structure and a little less to do with Tyler James Williams as an actor, but he plays his part well enough to make it all come together. And that's Let It Shine. So, what's the verdict? Let It Shine is an exceptional movie cultivated from the direction of an exceptional movie maker. The characters that are supposed to feel authentic and genuine feel exceptionally authentic and genuine, and even the characters that are slightly less plausible work well within their roles. The subtle brilliance of this movie is the idea that every character in the story had to find their own truth, except maybe Cyrus's mother and Levi, who seem like the only two characters to have things pretty much figured out, thus making them perfect guides for characters like Pastor Jacob and Cyrus respectively, as they try to grapple with their own preconceived notions and how those might need to change for the sake of themselves and the people around them. Everyone outside of those two more or less needed to change. Even Nicole Sullivan's character to a lesser degree needed to understand where Roxy was coming from and be okay with that, even if it went against her conventional industry wisdom. The title of the movie is the end result of that change, which is why the end song works so well in addition to being a fun song in its own right. It's only after you recognize the truth that you can let it shine. And that's also why Bling wasn't in that final number, because his character is still struggling with the idea even after the credits roll in, and that's brilliant as well. A lot of movies would have been tempted to resolve Bling as a character by having him see the light, so to speak, and become one of the good guys. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people lose and remain just as stubborn and resistant to change as they were in the beginning of the movie, and this movie intelligently recognizes that for Bling to change completely, it would take more than one lost battle. All in all, this movie works as well as it does, primarily because of its direction. I know, I sound like a broken record with my, at times, over-eagerness to praise the man, the myth, the legend, but I call him all of those things and more for a reason, and this movie is one of the biggest reasons. It's expertly crafted from start to finish, and for the entire runtime, it knows exactly what movie it wants to be and how to achieve that. Not a single scene of this film is wasted or feels out of place. None of the actors present ever engage in character inconsistencies or bouts of pure stupidity. Well, except for Chris, but that's part of his character. And considering how similar this movie is to another movie about rap battles, except way less family-friendly, it never felt too cheesy or juvenile, which is more than I can say for a lot of the rap music that gets popular in the real world. The soundtrack isn't the best in terms of totality, but there are some gems in there, so it's definitely worth it for the musical aspect as well. It's not a perfect movie because no movie is, but it just might be one of the best films with regards to avoiding major flaws. Yeah, sure, you've got the bit with the truth mix-up, but we see how absent-minded Cyrus's character can be. He arrived to church late at least twice, and he lives next door, so knowing that, it makes more sense that a slip-up like that could occur. And, when it's a flaw built into the characterization, it's not as much of a cinematic misstep. But, at the end of the day, similar to how I praise Lemonade Mouth, this is one of those movies where everyone came ready to work, did their jobs, and did them well. The plotline is a bit scattershot just in terms of engagement, but that balances the film better so it still works. The characters, even the less likable ones, all deliver solid performances, and in some cases, standout performances. And last, but certainly not least, Paul Hohen is just so damn good at this directing thing that he really makes it look easy. This man refuses to make a bad movie, and this one is arguably his best since True Confessions, or at least his best since Jump In. Everything about this movie from a technical perspective looks and feels exactly like it should. It's a character-driven story first and foremost, so wide shots and establishing shots are limited or non-existent because they wouldn't serve much of a purpose here. The setting is Midtown Atlanta, right in the heart of the rap scene, so the outfits and vernacular have to be authentic and lived in, and all of that works. You need to help me out on this one, guys. I'm trying, but I can't quite find an element of this film that would work better if changed. Maybe a few songs on the soundtrack could have been a bit more memorable, and maybe Roxy's arc could have been a little less predictable, but those feel like minor grievances at best in an otherwise exceptional film. Suffice it to say, this film comes highly recommended from me as one of the best DCOMs ever created. But don't just take my word for it, because as I often say, the only way to know for sure is to give it a watch and decide for yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, throw it on a like, subscribe for more, and share it with anyone willing to watch. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates, links down below. The top 10 best DCOMs list will probably be the next video depending on how long it takes to write. It's the one video I've thought about making for over 6 months, so I need it to be perfect. And it took me nearly a month to just decide on which 10 DCOMs and which 8 honorable mentions would even be represented, so hopefully you all enjoy the fruits of my labor. Then comes the Girl Meets Ski Lodge review, and eventually we'll jump back into Boy Meets World and take a closer look at Season 3. So, lots to look forward to. Until then...